anti-Semitism and racism of Christian influence have on the world. People often forget that Christianity either started or legitimized racism as we know it, anti-Semitism from a specifically and a racial perspective, because during antiquity it was less about race and more about nation. Who was a Roman? Who was an outsider? It wasn't really about judging the skin of their color, as more of their xenophobia or their culture, etc. As from the book of Disease Infected Christianity, where it points out the Christian origins of racism, it goes very deep from the first Christian intellectuals. But the ethnocentric pride of the classical epoch was never really a racial pride. Even Aristotle, with his parochial vision and his natural slaves, can scarcely be described as racist in the term we use today. It is more accurately seen as an insular Greek who insularly is uncritically revealed in his political reflections, Greco-Roman society. As Frank A. Snowden shows, while the fully aware of color and other physical difference between human beings was singularly devoid of racial prejudice, the Greeks and Romans attached no special stigma to color, regarding yellow hair or blue eyes or mere geographical accident, and developed no special racial theory about the inferiority of darker peoples qua darker peoples. There was even a tendency in classical letters to idealize the black Ethiopians as pious and just. When ancient artists placed white and black figures in juxtapositions on faces and other works of art, they did so for aesthetic rather than racial reasons, with pleasant and harmonious visual contrasts in mind. The goddess Isis, whose cult flourishes in the Roman Empire, had a black priest, and initially at least the newer religion of Christianity accepting toward racially different types of humanity of its Greco-Roman milieu. Did not the Son of Sons celebrate the beauty of the black Shulamite, who strive the king's love? And did not Paul, perhaps inspired by the poet Menander, emphasize the oneness of every kind of people in Christ? Moreover, in his commentary of the Song of Songs, the Alexandria extended Origen stoutly defended the black woman against the haughty daughters of Jerusalem, who, despite her lack of descent from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they should not have forgotten the leprosy God inflicted on Mary, or Miriam, for having criticized Moses for his marriage to a black Cushite woman in Numbers 12. However, as Margaret Pope points out, Origen's apparent approval of negritude in the name of the universal gospel was evident. The woman, an allegory for the Gentile church, was black by virtue of her sins and beautiful by virtue of her repentance. When the black but beautiful soul rises to greater things and begins to climb from the lowly to the lofty, she will be made white. Black and white, in other words, were not only color designation terms in ancient Christian usage, but also vivid and potent metaphors in opposite religion and moral connotations. To the Hebrews, the white symbolized on the Day of Atonement, and the angels is holy, appear in white clothing, while black, which absorbs all colors and thus buries the light, symbolized the death, humiliation, and mourning. These associations were certainly older than the Hebrew religion, perhaps as old as time itself, since the interplay between the light and life and the darkness and death is part of nature and easily derived from the more basic elements in human experiences. Whiteness brings to mind the light ascent into the bright realm, the immaculateness of virgin snow, and the transparency of limpid air. Origen, therefore, was not affirming the black woman of her blackness as such, rather than having identified lucidity and the reason as well as innocence and purity with light. He was urging that black soul to become white in order to taste of heavenly bliss. As Snowden demonstrated, this metaphorical dualism became a general pattern of the writings of the Church Fathers. For Christians who the writers of the first century after Christ, it made no difference whether one was racially different as a Scythian or as an Ethiopian. They regarded black all men who had not seen illuminated by God's light, and considered all men, regardless of the color of their skin, as potentially Christian. Because for their Neoplatonic theologians, the soul rather than the body was the object of redemption. The flesh was not important, therefore its color was not important. While this is certainly true, so it is its deeper implication. Christ came into the world to make blacks radiate brights, i.e., to make them inwardly, if not outwardly, white. Skin color, however, was regarded as important in at least part of the ancient world, for the notion of blackness can be result of a curse, also have early origins. The first suggests in rabbinic literature it seeped into Christianity as well, although at a later period. The text of which this claim was based the curse pronounced by Noah on his grandson Canaan, the son of Ham, because Ham had gazed on his father's nakedness when Noah was in the drunken stupor, was ripe for eventual racial exploitation. During the modern slave era, as we shall see, played a crucial role in rendering the black slavery congenial to Christian morality. From Genesis chapter 9, verse 25 to 27, cursed the Canaan, a slave of slaves shall he be to his brothers. Blessed by the Lord and by God be Shem, and let Canaan be his slave. God enlarge Shevet, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his slave. Ham, according to the rabbis, was smite in his skin, i.e. blackened. No doubt the proximity of the Near East to Africa prompted to his racial exegesis, which is certainly not supported by the text itself. Interestingly, the earliest anti-black discrimination measure in recorded history was an inscription on a pillar raised by Pharaoh Sesostris III at the second Kataka of the Nile about 2 millennia before the birth of Christ. On the other hand, during the reign of the darker-skinned pharaoh from southern Egypt, anti-white feelings were not unknown. Suode recognized among certain circles in antiquity possessed a more ominous feeling toward Ethiopians because of the affinity between blackness and death, the underworld and evil, and ancient society consequently was not entirely colorblind, and early Christianity, despite supposed universalism, was undoubtedly infected by these feelings. Christian asceticism, particularly in Egypt, soon intensified the association of darkness with evil by attaching demonic and bestial qualities to the skin color of Africans, as certain identified tales from the Egyptian desert fathers to the early church illustrated. In one such tale, the spirit of sexual lust, the devil's snare, is personal as an Edward, and an image of obviously conjured up by the nearby black world. Although race consciousness developed slowly in Western culture, its germination was early. Not only Christian asceticism, but Christian theology became infected. Since light is white, the divine logos itself, incarnate into Christ, must also be white, or else it could not conquer the darkness that engulfs both the world and the soul in its redemptive mission. Even prior to Christ, at the moment of creation, the logos was white. The metaphysical antithesis between the light and darkness were used to symbolize being and existence on the one hand, and non-being or chaos on the other. White and black, therefore, were elevated in the status of ontological as well as moral destination, and the character of all subsequent Christian thought was firmly set at this intellectual mold. As long as Christian theology was written by the white theologian, that is to say virtually until the present day, this battle was not seen as tainted with racial assumption. Such a charge would have seemed absurd to the very generation except the current one. It still seemed absurd to conservative defenders of the classical tradition. Nevertheless, this ontological dualism constituted a serious problem for non-white Christians, especially for black theologians, at least one of whom was wondered publicly and fifiously if God is a white racist. By extension, not only they treat this to anybody who is white because of their theological nature, but anti-Semitism was also the foundation of Christianity itself. I used to make a video in my old channel. It was like 1 hour long about the origins and history of anti-Semitism, but sadly I lost the footage and I'm not gonna do 1 hour hours of research again. To make this simple, it's been around since the very foundation of Christianity, where the Jews killed Christ, their Messiah, and adopted this anti-Jewish hatred because of the foundation they killed their founder of the religion, Jesus. And we can see anti-Semitic and anti-Judaism sentiment within Christianity, like Paul in 1 Thessalonians, where associated with Jews with malicious intent for killing their Messiah. and throughout Christian theology, like the existence of Jew was proof that their religion was right, and the anti-Semitic and the Jews will be punished for their betrayal of God. Augusta Hippo was one of the more leading figures, showing that the Jews, the reason we should not exterminate them, not because we respect them, because it's a reminder that we are the one true path. And because this theological foundation of them being the betrayers of God, many early Christians from the first 3 or 4 centuries had committed crimes against the Jewish people, like Ambrose of Mila and other similar figures who promoted the idea of burning their synagogues and attacking them almost indiscriminately. And within the early years of Christianity, all the original Jewish Christian sects were eliminated and now their texts were canonized, and only the Gentile Christian texts were canonized. So any Jewish Christian influence was all eliminated, with rare exceptions like the Gospel of Matthew. An early church father identified Jews and Judaism with heresy as outside of God. And even among more heretical sects like Marcion Senov declared the Jewish God was an inferior God to the Christian one. Other important figures within the church father was Tertullian, who's considered the father of Western Christian theology, and he considered the Gentiles were chosen by God to replace the Jews. Or Origen Alexandria, even though he was very knowledgeable, is considered one of the first Christian intellectuals. He defended the canonical Old Testament, defended the Jews in the past, but nonetheless he condemned the Jews of his time for not understanding their own laws, and insisted the Christians were the true Israel, and blamed them for their prophet's death. And let's not forget, all this hatred against Jews and black people will be heavily influenced by the Atlantic slave trade, where they used the Bible as a justification to enslave black people. And during the American Civil War, many of the Confederates used the Bible as a justification as God-given right for black people being inferior. Or the first slave ship to arrive to the United States was called Jesus. Or for the anti-Semitism, many of the medieval period, many Jews were expelled or exiled from many countries all over Europe. And even Martin Luther, the father of the Reformation, was so anti-Semitic that actually influenced Nazism as we speak. The Nazism, as we know, would not exist without Martin Luther, especially his hatred against the Jews. And Nazi and Hitler's version of Christianity was heavily based of Martin Luther's ideas of Jews and how to get rid of them. Like I said, I will put links in the description of certain books and recommendations I will give you to have a better understanding about the topic overall. This is just a short video, but it's something that has to be talked about and should be educational. So, see you again next time.